Today's daf we're going to be learning is Megillah Yud Gimel. This is the daf for Shabbat. Today's daf is sponsored by Karen Sherrington on her birthday in loving memory of her grandfather Abraham and grandmothers Miriam and Chana. I miss them in an honor that my daughters are named after them and keep their memories alive. Today's daf is also sponsored by Susan Kashdan in loving memory of her father Yitzchak ben Moshe Chone. Okay, we're going to get started now on the bottom of Yud Bet Amud Bet. So we were in the middle of this question, Ish Yehudi Haya b'Shushana Bira, right? Going along with the drashot in the Megillah, we're up to the pasuk that there was a Jewish man, Yehudi, but Yehudi in our language means Jewish, but in the time of the Tanakh, it usually meant from the tribe of Judah. On the other hand, he was called Ish Yemini Mordechai. He was called, at the end of the verse, it says he was Ish Yemini, which means he came from Binyamin. So how could he be from Yehuda and from Binyamin? So there were different answers given. We're up to Rava Amal, Knesi Israel Amara. Okay, so we saw that either, right, he came from both. We saw either his mother was from one, his father was from the other, right? We then said that they're each trying to take responsibility, saying it's because of me or it's because of me, because, right, we said, the Yehuda said, hey, David didn't kill Shlomi ben Gera, and because of that, Mordechai was born. And Binyamin says, no, came from my tribe. He was born from me. That's more significant. So Rava now says, Knesi Yisrael amra li'idach gisa. The Jewish people say something other than that, according to Rava. In other words, it was a response of the Jewish people to the tribes of Binyamin and Yehuda. And they said, and it was specifically Yehuda and Binyamin were negative influences on this story. How so? Re'uma sali Yehudi uma shilem li yemini. Look what the one from Yehuda did, and look what price the Binyamin kind of had to pay. Okay, or the price he or what he caused me to have to do. Let's see. Ma sali Yehudi de lo katle David l'shimi. Look what Yehuda did. David didn't kill Shimi ben Gera. Look what happened because of that. Now, until now, we assume Mordechai being born was a good thing. This is a fascinating midrash that says Mordechai's birth was a bad thing. Why? Well, think about who caused this whole story to happen. Haman. He caused Haman to get jealous of him because he wouldn't bow to Haman. And that's what caused the entire story to happen. None of this would have happened were it not for Mordechai. So it's all Yehuda's fault for David not killing Shimi ben Gera. This never would have happened. Uma shilem lo yemini. What was the price that had to be paid by Binyamin? Dilokat le Shaul Agag. He didn't kill Agag. Remember the famous story with Amalek, and he left the king alive. Haman, and from that, Haman was born, who tortured the Jewish people, and there you have it. It was both the fault of Yehuda, Mordechai was at fault, and Shaul was at fault because of Haman, because Haman was at fault because he obviously started the whole thing. Rabbi Yochanan Amal, another explanation. Lo olami Binyamin ka'ate, v'amai kare le Yehuda. He really came from Binyamin, but why did they call him Yehudi? Al shum shekafar ba'avodah zarah. This has nothing to do with the tribe of Judah. It has to do with who is called Yehudi, somebody who doesn't worship idols. Kidichtiv, as it says in the story in the Sefer Daniel, Itai Guvra Yehudayim. There are Jewish Yehudim. There are men who are Yehudim. The rabbi said this refers to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, who didn't worship. The pasuk continues to say that their names in the pasuk are Shadrach, Meshach, Avadnego, and they didn't worship Lo Palchin, Ulitzlam, that right to their gods they don't worship, and they don't worship the idols. So here you see they're called Yehudim, people who don't worship idols. And we're going to have another drasha that's going to come for Divrei Yamim about someone who's called a Yehudi, who's someone who doesn't worship idols. And that's why, because Mordechai did not worship Haman. Haman turned himself into an idol and he didn't worship. That's why he was called a Yehudi. Rabbi Shimon ben Paz. When he would open a drasha about Divrei Yamim, he would say the following. All these names listed in Divrei Yamim, many of them are actually referring to the same person, but we know how to darshan it. In other words, these names aren't always real names. They're names meant to be extrapolated. So here's our pasuk, and actually very apropos, it's Shabbat, it's for the Shabbat daf, and we're reading Parshat Shemot this week, and we're going to learn about Bat Paro, Bitya Bat Paro, the daughter of Pharaoh, who brings Moshe out of the water and saves him and brings him up. So Ishto HaYehudia, this is in a list in Divrei Hayamim in Chronicles that lists Kalev ben Yefuneh, who was from the tribe of Judah, although that's not relevant here. And it says that his wife, it's interesting, according to this explanation, Kalev marries Bitya bat Paro. Okay, it's what it says in Chronicles. Ishto HaYehudia, and his wife, who is a Yehudia, which we're going to see means she didn't worship idols. Yalda et Yered Avi Gedor. She gave birth to Yered, the son of Gedor, the father of Gedor. Ve'et Chever Avi Socho. Ve'et Yekutiel Avi Noach. Okay, she gave birth to these 3 sons, who we're going to see are actually all one son. And she actually didn't give birth to them, but it's all a reference to Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, we'll get to that all soon. Ve'ele b'nei Bitya bat Paro asher lakach Mared. And these are the sons of Bitya, the daughter of Paro, who was married to Mared, okay, who we just said was married to Kalev. We're going to see that Mared is Kalev, and then we're going to have to darshan all these names, and what is it, and why are they all called by different names, and what's the meaning. So, Amai Kare le Yehudia. So the first question is, why is she called a Jew? She clearly wasn't Jewish. She was the daughter of Pharaoh. So they say, Al shum shekafra ba'avodah zara, because she rejected idol worship of her father, Dichtiv. Vateret bat Paro lilchotz al hayor, when she goes down to the Yeor, to the Nile, to wash herself, what is she washing herself from? She went to wash herself free of the idols of her father. That was a moment where she kind of says, I'm leaving the idol worship world, and therefore she was called a Yehudia. And that goes in sync with what we saw before. Yalda. So now they say we're going to have a whole bunch of other questions on this verse. What do you mean Yalda? She just brought him up. She wasn't his mother. If you bring up an orphan, which is interesting because Moshe wasn't an orphan, but someone who doesn't have parents to take care of them, it's as if you gave birth to them. Okay, this is for anyone who's adopted children, right? It's an amazing thing. It's as if you gave birth to them. No, I skipped that. I went back. Okay, Yered, ze Moshe. So why is Moshe called Yered? Because Yered is to go down, and the man came down, showered down on the people during the time of Moshe. So because of that, Yered, he helped to bring the man. Gidol, shegadar pirtzotehen shel Yisrael. He closed the breaches in the wall of the Jewish people, which is a reference to the Torah. The Torah helps protect the people, right, from sinning and any kind of breaches. So he kind of helped rein that in. Chever, shechiber et avihem, right? So why chever? These are all the words, right? Yered avi gidol, et chever avi socho. Soon we're going to get to the avi word, but right now we're not up to that. Chever, shechiber et Yisrael avihen shebashamayim. He connected the Jewish people to God. He was like the in-between person, right? The one that connected. Socho, shenasa lehem Yisrael kesuka. He protected the Jewish people. He was like a sukkah that protects the people. Yekutiel, shekivu Yisrael le'el b'yamav. Yekutiel comes from likavot. They all they looked toward. They went to be with God. Kivu, they hoped for God. That's the word I was looking for in his times, right? Because now what's that? So the commentaries say, well, when they didn't have food and they didn't have water and they were complaining about the need and all that, it gave them, right? They went and pleaded to God. Zanoach, what about that word? That's a weird one. Lahazniach is usually to leave aside in a bad way, to abandon. His niach avonotehen shel Yisrael. What did he help abandon? The sins of the Jewish people, because he always was getting forgiveness for them. So he made their sins kind of go away. Avi, avi, avi. Why does avi mentioned 3 times? Av b'Torah, av b'chokhmah, av b'neviut. He was a father to them in Torah, meaning he was a leader in Torah. He was a leader in intelligence, chokhmah. He was wise. And right, he would always judge the people, and niviut, and also prophecy. Ve'ele b'nei Bitya asher lakach Mared. What are we left with? This Mared word. Why is that Kalev? V'chi Mered shmo halel Kalev shmo. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu yavo Kalev. Now we're going to hear why the 2 of them married each other. God said, Yavo Kalev shemarad ba'atzat meraglim. He went against what the meraglim, the spies. Remember, all the spies came back, and other than Yoshua, right? He and Yoshua, the only ones who stood by and said, no, we should go into the land, and everybody else was against it. So he rebelled in a positive way. This is a positive rebellion. He rebelled against what the spies wanted to do, She rebelled by going against the idol worship of her father. Asher Haglam Yerushalayim. Continuing on in the verses. Now it describes, we had Mordechai as an Ish Yehudi, right? Ish Yehudi and his Yemini. Now we get another description. Asher Haglam Yerushalayim. He went into the exile from Yerushalayim. Im Hagola Asher Hugleta. With the Golah that went out. Okay, he went out with Yechonia Melech Yehuda in the earlier stage of the exile. Now, why does it say it's so convoluted? It could have just said it much more simply. Uhigla or something, without saying im hagola, with the gola. So the Midrash says, Amarava, Rava says, he darshans it, shegala me'atzmo. He put himself into exile. Okay, he decided, I'm going to exile myself. Why? Because he wanted to be support for the Jewish people. He felt they needed someone to help support them. So he went into exile with them. This is a good, right? All these people who say, I'm not going to go on Aliyah because people in the diaspora need me. Vahi omen et hadasa. So now it says he was omen et hadasa, whatever omen means, which isn't so clear, but what is hadasa? Who is hadasa? So karela hadasa, karela Esther. We've already seen this, that hadasa is a name for Esther. Tanya, the Braita says, Rabbi Meir Omer, Esther Shma, her real name. This is always when you darshan names and someone has two names, which is the real and which is the one that's meant to be darshaned. So Rabbi Meir says her real name was Esther. Because Hadassim are myrtle branches. The tzaddikim are referred to as Hadassim. How do we know this? It's a pasuk in Zechariah where he says, I'm standing among the righteous people. So that's why she was called Hadassah. But we're going to have different explanations. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Hadassah Shma, her real name was Hadassah. She hid who she was. Remember, Esther would tell Achashverosh where she came from, what her nation was. Right? She didn't tell what her nation was and where she came from. Rabbi Nechemia Omer, Hadassah Esther melashon lahastir, to hide. Rabbi Nechemia Omer, Hadassah Shma, v'lama nikret Shma Esther, shayu umot ha'olam korin ota al shum Istahar. Istar is either Venus or maybe the moon. So she was as beautiful as a planet, basically. It's a way of saying, right, how beautiful she was. So she was called Al Shem Istahar. They called her Esther. Ben Azai Omer, and not only that, but the other nations of the world were amazed by her beauty. Ben Azai Omer, Esther lo aruka v'lo k'tzara. Another connection to this Hadassah and Hadassim. She wasn't too tall and she wasn't too short. She was average height, ela benonit. Ke Hadassah, just like a Hadass bush is average height. It's not too tall, it's not too short. Rabbi Yeshua ben Korchomer, Esther, one of my, I would say, sort of favorite, but not exactly. It's a little bit of a complicated line. Esther yirak roket haita. She was green. V'chut shel chesed mashuch aleh, but she had this chut of chesed. She had a string of chesed that went through her that basically made her look beautiful. In other words, she was really ugly. Okay, according to one midrash, or one way of understanding this midrash, she was really ugly. I mean, think about green, right? What comes to mind? Shrek, Fiona, right? Green. Okay, but she had this chut of chesed and it made her look beautiful. Okay, or it saying she was really ugly. But why does it say she was beautiful in the eyes of Achashverosh? Because it was an amazing miracle that Achashverosh thought she was beautiful, even though she was really green and ugly. Okay, some people explain, what does it mean Yirak Roket? It doesn't mean green like Shrek. Okay, often in the Gemara, they talk about, if you learned Nida, so in Nida, they talk about green blood. What's green blood? So it's yellowish in color. Green is really used, because anyway, there's yellow and green, but in the Gemara, they often use it to have a yellowish. And sometimes people are sick, they say you look green, right? And it could be also they're describing like when she went to the king and he puts out his scepter, she had fasted for 3 days, right? Or she said, Sumo alai. It's not clear. I can't remember now if it's clear she fasted or not. But right, no, Gaman even Aratai Natsumken. They also fasted. So it could be she was sick. She looked green and pale from fasting. Although here they're already talking about in the earlier stage about when she's called Hadassah. Anyway, it's possible that also was a miracle. She was so sick after not eating for 3 days. She looked awful. And yet the king found her beautiful. Okay. Anyway, all sorts of different interpretations of a very strange midrash. I assume, right, like many midrashim, they're not meant to be understood literally, that she was actually really green in color, which is one of the reasons why I like it, because it's a good example of don't take these midrashim literally. Okay, next. Ki ein la av v'eim. Okay, she didn't have parents, right? This is, it says, Sorry, I need to find the pasuk. It says, "Vayi omenet hadasa." Okay, he kind of took care of Hadassah. He Esther bat dodo. The pasuk even says she's Esther, who was his cousin. Ki ein la avain, because she didn't have any parents. V'hanara yefat Torah v'tovat mareh. She was beautiful, which is hard to say. Then she was Yirak Roket and not beautiful, but. Ubemot avia v'ima, and when her parents died, lekacha Mordechai lo laban. Mordechai brought her in as a daughter. So we're going to have a whole bunch of drashot on this first. It now says, once it says she didn't have a father or mother, of course she didn't have a father or mother because they died. What else could have happened to them? So why do you need to say also when they died, he took her under his wing? Could have just said, and he took her under his wing. What they wanted us to know is that when did her parents die? So they darshan from this pasuk. Her father died when the mother got pregnant, and the mother died in childbirth. And when they died, he took her to be his daughter. It sounds like he adopted her. But Tana Mishum Rabbi Meir, very famous drasha. We're going to see a lot of famous drashot today. Tana, in the name of Rabbi Meir, says, Al tikri levat ela lebayit. Don't call it lebat. It means lebayit. As a wife, he took her in to be his wife. V'cheinu omer, and it comes up in another verse in the Tanakh. This is after David sins with Bathsheba. He gets reprimanded by Natan HaNavi, and the way Natan HaNavi does it is he tells him a story about a poor shepherd who has only one sheep, and he says, "V'larash ein kol ki'im." This poor man has nothing. Ki'im kipsa achat ktana asher kana. He only has one little sheep that he bought. And he brought her up, and he was among her sons. He ate from his bread, drank from his drinks, and slept in his bosom. But Tehilo kibat, and she was like him like a daughter. Now, really, what he was referring to was the relationship between Uriah and his wife. Okay. Gives it in this analogy of a shepherd, because also David was a shepherd, but it's really talking about his wife. So, right? Because she slept with him, right? It was his daughter. It must be bat there means bayit, wife, therefore it must mean the same thing here. Okay, now she gets taken to, right, for the beauty pageant, right? Who's going to win and become the queen? So, she has these 7 na'arot who are with her. They give her 7 na'arot. Why 7? How do you think she kept track of when Shabbat was? Every day, a different servant would come. Of these 7, whenever the one came that was Shabbat, she knew that's how she kept track of days. She knew that it was Shabbat that day. You will see this in some other ones about how she kept her Judaism while she was doing this. So then it says, right, he gave her something special. What did he give her? So this is, again, the same idea. Amarav, right, they liked her. The guy who was in charge, liked her. So he gave her special things, her and her na'arot. What kind of special things? So the first explanation is, Amarav shechilam achal Yehudi. He gave her kosher food. That was what she needed. He gave her the kosher food. Ushmuel amar shechila kadlei de chazire. He gave her parts of a pig. That sounds pretty crazy, right? Non-kosher food, what are you talking about? So the point is, he gave her something special. He didn't know she was kosher, so he gave her the best of the best, which was from the pork. Okay. Now, Tosfot says, just so you know, don't think that she ate the pork, okay? It's just that she was given something special. Of course, she couldn't eat it. She was stuck, right? It's like going somewhere, and then they give you the best of the best, but it turns out it's not kosher food. It's the worst, right? You have this yummy, delicious food in front of you, but you can't eat it. But so that's a very big difference between Rav and Shmuel. Was she given specifically kosher food or was she given non-kosher food? It was a delicacy, but she couldn't eat it. Some people, by the way, have a different version of this. It's not chazire, it's chizre, which is chazeret. We remember that from Pesach, which is a type of lettuce. And she got a special kind of lettuce. And that was what it was, which then she was able to eat. And that's going to be, though, more similar to the next explanation, which is Rabbi Yochanan Amar Zeronim. She got vegetables. Okay, right? This is like you can be vegan somewhere, right? That's basically all you have to eat is vegetables because you can't eat anything else. Nothing else is kosher. So we made it easier for her to be kosher by giving her lots of vegetables. This is a pasuk in Daniel, which also they were eating at the king's table, and they would get this pat bagam and zer onim. They got vegetables. That was something they could eat. Shisha chodeshim b'shemen hamor. Then she's 6 months. They put her with the shemen hamor in her body. My shemen hamor, what is this? Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amal, he said, sitachat. Okay, it's this type of balsam oil. Rav Huna Amal, shemen zayit shaloi b'shlish. No, it's this very special type of olive oil, which is you take olives before they've even gotten to 1/3 of their growth, and you make olive oil out of it. And we're going to see what it's called right now. Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer, anpakinun. That's what it's called. That's shemen zayit shaloi b'shlish. Didn't get to 1/3 of its growth. The lama sachinoto, and why do people put it on their bodies? It's a depilatory cream. It takes the hair off and it makes the skin very smooth. Now we got the sexual habits of Achashverosh. Every night, a woman would come, one of these young girls would come sleep with him, and in the morning she would leave. So, from the terrible things that this person did, which sleeping every night with a different woman, we learned, though, his praises. There was what? He only had relations at night. And this is a halacha that comes up in a number of places, that for tzniut reasons, you should always have relations at night. And therefore, they say, look, even Achashverosh did that. But Esther noset chen. This we already saw a few dapim ago. How is it? Remember, we had this whole thing. Is the Megillah written Beruach HaKodesh, right? With prophet, right? That God was kind of telling us the Megillah. Whoever wrote it had Beruach HaKodesh. How did they know? Because how else would we know that she was noset chen be'enei kol ro'eh? Everybody thought she was beautiful. But then we explained, based on this, that everybody, it was obvious everybody liked her because to everybody she looked like one of theirs, right? She had a look like their nation. Everybody likes the look of someone who's familiar to them, as we discussed previously. But she gets taken into his house on Chodesh Tevet. Why is that important? Right now, in the middle of Chodesh Tevet, in Israel, we're in the middle of a big stormy week. Yerach shenahana guf mikuf. It was the month where it's freezing and people like to have warm bodies next to them to warm them up. So she was all the more appealing to Achashverosh because it was freezing and he wanted to snuggle with her in bed. He loved her from all the other women, and she found favor in his eyes from all the virgin women. So why does it say all the women and all the virgins? It seems to be redundant, and yet it seems to be saying two different things. So, Amar Rav bikesh lit'om tam betulat ha'am, tam be'ulat ha'am. We're now getting into the relations they had, that if he wanted to have a sensation when he would have relations with her, that it was like a virgin, it would feel that way. And if he wanted when she was not a virgin, then it would feel that way as well. It was kind of like the man that you could taste any flavor you wanted. That was sort of the way it was when he had relations with Esther. It's a bit of a strange drasha. Anyway, we'll move on from there. So then he makes this big party. And before I even read the continuation, he makes this party. And then it says, Et Mishte Esther. He does this party. He called it Mishte Esther, the Party of Esther. He lowered the taxes for people. And he gave gifts to all his officers from the king. So the question is, why did he do all this and what was his purpose? And then after that pasuk, it says, the next verse is, then they gathered the virgins a second time, which we're going to have to understand why. Didn't he just marry Esther? Why does he need another bride? And then Mordechai is sitting in the Shar HaMelech. What's the connection between he's looking for a new wife and Mordechai is in the gate, in the king's court or the king's area, and then courtyard. And then the next pasuk is, she doesn't say where she comes from. Okay? Asher, right? And then we're going to see, right? Because Mordechai, right? Because Mordechai commanded her not to say. So now we're going to have to understand the whole connection of these things. And what the Gemara here is going to do is that we're going to say that the last sentence where it says she didn't tell anybody who she was is connected to the previous ones as well. And that all these things Achashverosh did in order to try to get her. He was very curious and he wanted to know who she was and where she came from. So he tried all these tactics to get the information out of her, but in the end, she wouldn't tell anyway. So the first thing he tries to do is abab mishtaya, make a party. That's the best way to get information out of anyone, get them drunk, then they'll tell their story. But lo gal yale, she wouldn't tell him. Dale karga, he lowers the taxes, figuring she'll be in a good mood. Maybe she'll say something below galyale, but she wouldn't tell. Shadar pardishne, he sent out gifts. So Rashi says in her name, okay, so that she would again be viewed as someone amazing, and maybe then she would tell below galyale, but she didn't. Ubi hikabetz ptulot sheni, then he gathers up more women. Azil shakel etzami Mordechai. Why did he do this? Because he got advice from Mordechai. That's why it says in that pasuk, Mordechai was sitting in the Shar HaMelech, the king's courtyard. Amav, he went to Mordechai to try to figure out. He didn't realize that Mordechai was on Esther's side and had told her not to say. So he says to Mordechai, how can I get Esther to tell me where she comes from? So Mordechai says, Ein isha mitkana ela b'yerech haverta. Women in general, they get jealous when you bring another woman into the picture. So bring another woman, that will get her jealous, and then she'll tell you whatever you want because she'll want to be still the chosen one. But still she didn't tell. How do we know? Because she wouldn't say where she was from. Why Mordechai did this? Some people say he had ulterior motives. He was trying to get the king to be with someone else and maybe divorce Esther and get her out of the picture so that, right, first of all, she was his wife. And it wasn't so great having Esther, who he was kind of in charge of since the parents died, get taken away by the king. So it's possible that that's why Mordechai actually gave him that advice, even though from Ahasuerus's perspective, he was giving them the advice in order to get Esther to tell him where she was from. Amal Rabbi Elazar, next Rasha. My dichtiv, we're now going to skip to a verse in Iyov. In Iyov it says, Lo yigra mitzadik enav. Tzaddik will always get what the tzaddik is deserving. A righteous person will never be spared the reward they're supposed to get. So now we're going to talk about two people that got rewarded, and this is going to lead us to Esther. Because Rachel was sanua, we're going to see what sanua means in this context. Really, it's going to mean that she didn't only care about herself, but cared about others as well. Zachtavia, and was willing to sacrifice herself for the sake of her sister, we'll see. Very famous midrash is going to come up here. Zachtavia tzamimena Shaul, because of what she did, Shaul HaMelech came from her, the first king of Israel. Ubischar tzniut shayabo b'Shaul, and because of his tzniut, which we'll see what that is, Zachavi yatzat mimenu Esther. Esther comes from Shaul, because remember, she was related to Mordechai, and Mordechai was from Binyamin. Umat tzniut hayta b'Rachel. What kind of tzniut? What was the story? Dichtiv, as it says, Vayaged Yaakov leRachel ki achi aviyahu. It's a strange pasuk where Yaakov tells Rachel that he is the father of her, the brother of her father. Now he's not the brother of her father. His mother is the brother of her father, right? He is her cousin. So he is really Hello, ben achot aviyahu. He is the son of the sister of Lavan, but not the brother of Lavan. So Ella, there must be a backstory to it. And what does he mean when he says brother? He means something else. And we'll see right now. Ella amar la mitzvah. He said, marry me. Amar le, yes, I want to marry you. Mihu, but there's one catch. Abba rema'ahu, my father is a trickster. V'lo yachale, and he's not going to allow this. Amar la, he says to her, achiv ana berama'ot. When he says, I'm your father's brother, what he means is I'm his brother in trickery. I can do that too. Look, I tricked my father with the blessing. I know how to handle someone like that. To which she says, Amra le, umishari letzadiki lesaguya baramayuta? Can a righteous person like you be involved in trickery? No way. Amar la, he says, yes, in fact, we can. It says in this song that David sings when Shaul HaMelech dies, Im navar, when titaval, ve'imikesh titapal. When you're with someone who's deceiving kind of person, you're allowed to go down to their level and deceive them back. Okay, so you're allowed to do that. Amarle. So Amarla. So then he says to her, my Rabbi Yute, what's this trickery is going to engage in? Amrale. She said to him, Ile achta de kashishamnat. I have an older sister. He's not going to let me get married before her. Masar la simanim. So he gave her simanim, and that way he'd know at the wedding, was it her or was it Leah? And then he'd know, and if it was Leah, he wouldn't go ahead with the wedding. Kimata Lelia, but when the night came, Amra, hashta mikasva achatay. All of a sudden, she started thinking about her sister, and she said she's going to be totally humiliated, right? When it turns out it was Leah, and he refuses to marry her, what a huge humiliation to my sister. Masartinu niala. So she gives Leah the simanim. And behind Udichtiv, and this is why it says, and this explains the verse, and he wakes up in the morning, and it turns out it was Leah who he was with all along, when he didn't know that, right? So they say, in the morning she was Leah, she transformed from Rachel to Leah. Of course not. It wasn't that in the morning she was Leah. Because it was dark at night and he didn't see her. So because, right, and also they say, right, she had the veil on at the wedding, and then at night in the house it was dark. He didn't realize. So therefore, right, he didn't know until the morning when he saw her that it was really Leah that he had married and not Rachel. And that was all because of the simanim that Rachel gave to Leah. That shows her tzniut. It's not the usual tzniut. It just means not thinking of herself, but thinking of other people over herself. And therefore Shaul came from Rachel, which came from Binyamin. Binyamin came from Rachel. What was his tzniut? This is a little bit of a simpler story. Dichtiv, after Shmuel, there's a whole thing with his donkeys get lost, and he goes to find them, and there's a whole thing, and he finds his donkeys. He finds out that Shmuel finds him, and he finds Shmuel, and then he's told that he's going to become king. So then his uncle is in the picture, and it says, Dichtiv etvar melucha lo higidlo asher amar Shmuel. He didn't tell his uncle that he became king. That was tzanuah. He didn't go bragging and saying, look, I became king. He didn't do that. Zacha v'yatsa mimenu Esther. And because of that, he was zocheh. He merited that Esther came from him. V'amar Rabbi Eliezer, kishakadosh baruch hu posek gedula la'adam, posek lebanav u'lebnei banav ad sof kol hadorot. When God decides to give greatness to someone, he not only gives it to them, he gives it to all their future generations. Shene'amal, why are we getting to this? Because this is the continuation of that verse in Eov. We said, Lo yigrami tzaddik einav, we won't, right? God won't refrain from giving the tzaddik what he deserves. But yoshivem lanetzach vayigbau. They will be left to sit forever. That means even their future generations. Vayigbau, and they will rise up. Ve'imi gista ato, however, the next pasuk is a negative one. The next pasuk says, "Ve'im asurim bezikim," and if they're tied in chains, then yilkedun bechavlei oni. They will be caught with the bindings of an impoverished person. So they say here, now how did we all of a sudden get from good and high to bad? Well, that's because going high, right, and being lifted up and being put in a very high position often comes with corruption and bad, and people who become too arrogant and then turn bad. So therefore, they take the last word of the previous pasuk, v'yigbau, and they say, imigista atov, he becomes too arrogant, God will bring him right down. Shene'emar v'im asurim b'zikim, and that's the next verse. Ve'et ma'amar Mordechai Esther osa. She did whatever Mordechai told her. What is that? So Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, what kind of ma'amar would he be telling her? It's a rabbinic drasha, you'd have to say. She would show her blood to the Chachamim to help determine was she in nida or not in terms of laws of impurity and separation from her husband. So she was in connection with the rabbis asking halachot. Okay, this is classic in the Bavli. They're always trying to connect things to the Beit Midrash, to the halachas. Even the fact that we're going to see that Mordechai apparently was in the Sanhedrin. It's another drasha that we mentioned previously, and we're going to see again today. Is the rabbis' way, right? They viewed themselves as at the center. What does it mean like she was when she used to be, right, when she was be'omno? Remember it said he was omenet hadasa? So it says she would do it, Esther, what Mordechai told her, like it was previously. So what does that mean? She would be done with nida, she'd leave Achashverosh, she'd go to the mikveh, and then she'd go with Mordechai. Again, hard to understand this exactly, but anyway. Right, how'd she do that? She was an Eshet Ish, right? It's a little bit complicated, the whole thing. I guess you just see she viewed her relationship with Achashverosh as really, she was just doing what she had to do, but it wasn't really any sort of relationship. She didn't view herself as married to him. Right? In those days, we're at the end of chapter 2, Mordechai is sitting in the king's courtyard, and Bigtan and Teresh got angry at the king. We're now going to dash to this word katsaf. So it also means like to laktsif is to whip up. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, ktsif akadosh baruch hu adon al abadav la'asot ritzon tzaddik. God stirred up, and this is in a totally different story, stirred up anger from a master on his servant in order to do something good for a tzaddik, for a righteous person. What is this? Umanu Yosef. This is for Yosef. Shenema v'sham itanu nar ivri. Right? Remember they said in jail, we were with this Jewish kid, right? The Vasar Mashkim remembers Yosef and comes and brings him back. He gets Yosef out of jail. So basically, God made Paro angry on the Sar Mashkim, the Sarofim, so that they would have dreams. Yosef would interpret them, and then eventually he'd get back into Paro. He'd get back out of jail. Avadim ala donehem la'asot nes l'tzadik. So now they say, right, it's for avadim, servants, try to sometimes do things against their masters. Maybe there's a word missing here. I assume it means katsaf. Katsaf avadim ala donehem. Here we have the reverse. The servants get angry at their master, la'asot nes l'tzadik. And who is that? Manu Mordechai. He hears what they did, and that basically led to Mordechai being put in a higher place, right? The whole story with the sus and all that, with the horse of the king and the clothes of the king, blah, blah, blah. That's because of Mordechai, right? In the end, that helps switch things around. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Biktam v'teresh shnei tarsiyim hayu. Hayu mesaprim bilshon torsi. Okay, so now, when it says, Vayivada davar leMordechai, how did Mordechai find out? Because these guys were Tarsi, and they came from the city of Tarsi. And they spoke their language, Torsi, which is Torsi. They said, since Esther got into the kingdom, king never sleeps anymore. He's always with Esther at night. He must be very thirsty from engaging in relations all the time. So let's put poison in his drink, and then he'll die, right? Because he'll want to drink a lot because he's thirsty, and then he'll die. They had no idea that Mordechai was someone who sat in the Lishkat Gazit, which is the place the Sanhedrin sat. Why is that important? Because everyone in the Sanhedrin knew 70 languages. That was one of the criteria. Okay, whether they really did or not is a good question. But the point is, he knew their language. Amar lo. Now, here goes the conversation between them. One of them said to the other, we don't have watch at the same time. We're not on the same shifts. Okay, why is this relevant? There's many, many different interpretations. It's not so clear. I'll go with one. It basically says if we're not on the same shift, one said to the other, listen, I don't trust you. If you do this when you're on shift and I'm not, you might deceive me. You might make it look like I did it and, trip me up or something. So he said, I don't trust you. Amar lo. So the other one said, Ani yeshmor mishmarti u mishmarcha. I'll do my shift and your shift, so I'll be on at the shift at the same time as you. What happens in the story? It says Mordechai told the king, right, passes on the word to the king about what they were trying to do. And then it says they looked into it and they found out that it was true. How could they have found out it was true? All they did was plot to do something, but they didn't actually do it. So they say, they noticed that someone had switched the shifts around. And that was the key that gave them, they saw they weren't doing their shift at the right time. The things were off, and then they realized they must be plotting together, that the fact that Mordechai said they were plotting together, here it was proven because then they had the same shifts. Again, there's different ways of interpreting what the shift was. Maybe they had different shifts. Anyway, the point is they changed something in the shifts, and because of that, they were found out. After what? Some people don't even have those words because it's obvious. Right after that, what happened? At Haman. They start to bring Haman up. So what do we learn from this? After the Biktam V'teresh story, and Mordechai is already in a good position, that's when he brings Haman. Okay, and that's when the whole story begins, right? All the trouble. Because God always brings the solution before he brings the makkah, the bad things that are coming. Ta'amar Rish Lakish. And Kadosh Baruch Hu maket Israel. God doesn't smite the people, the Jewish people. Elim came b'leilahem refuat chila, unless he already has the resolution. Shneimar kirof'i Yisrael v'nigla avon Ephraim. When I cure Yisrael, and then I will reveal the iniquity of Ephraim. I will only punish them once I already have the refuah. Aval umot ha'olam eino ken, but in the other nations of the world, it's not the same. Makeh otam v'achar kach borei lahem refuah. How do we know? First he smites them, and then he brings the refuah. Then he creates it. Shneimar v'nagaf Hashem et Mitzrayim nagof v'rafo. First he smote them with plagues, and then he cured them. This is a strange pasuk. It says Haman wants Mordechai made Haman look bad, and therefore he wanted to kill Mordechai, levado, only. But then the pasuk continues and it says, Ki gidu lo et al Mordechai, because they told him the nation of Mordechai. So we move from Mordechai himself to the nation of Mordechai. And then it says he wants to destroy all the Jewish people. So how did we get from one to the other so quickly? He moved from one to the other. First Mordechai, then he decided he wanted to kill everybody, the nation of Mordechai. We're going to have to distinguish between the nation of Mordechai and all of the Yehudi. Isn't that the same thing? So they say the nation of Mordechai, Manu Rabbanit. This is again, classic Bavli. The rabbis are kind of in they're their own nation in and of themselves. And then all the Jews. He peeled poor Huagoral. Tana, Kevan Shanafal poor B'chodesh Adar Samach Simcha Gdola. He said, "Oh, great! It came out on Adar." Haman said, "This is amazing. Why?" Amar Nafali poor B'Yerach Shemei Po Moshe. It's the month that Moshe died. Great time, right? Bad things happened. Moshe died, but Lo Haya Yodeh Sheb'Shiva Ba'Adar Meit B'Shiva Ba'Adar Nolad. But he didn't realize Moshe was born in the same month that he died, also on the same day even. Now we get to one of the most famous midrashim in the story of Esther, and it's basically the anti-Semitism midrash. Okay, you'll hear all the anti-Semitism themes. Okay, motifs. Yeshno am echad. Okay, what we're talking about is the verse that says there's one nation, mifozar mifora bein amim, right, divided and split up among all the nations. Then it continues to say, B'chol medinot malchutcha, in all the states of your kingdom, v'datehem shonot mikol am, they have different rules than all the other nations. Et datei hamelech ein amosim, they don't do the rules of the king. V'lamelech ein shoveh lehanicham, and it's just not worth keeping them. And then Achashverosh is basically convinced. So the question is, what in this verse is Haman able to convince the king? How is he able to convince the king? Yeshno am echad, amar Rav, leka deyada lishna bishna kama. Nobody knew how to say lashon, bad language about people, lashon hara, better than Haman. How so? Amar le, Tanechlinu, he says to Achashverosh, let's kill them. Amar le, Mistafina me'elohav, delolav b'kidavi b'kamai. I'm a little scared of him. I mean, look what he did. He killed Paro, Sancherev, right? All these other people. He destroyed them. I'm a little nervous. So Amar le, yeshnu min hamitzvot. Yeshno amechad, he says yashnu. Not yeshno, there is. Yashnu, they're sleeping from mitzvot. They're not doing mitzvot anymore. Don't worry. They don't have any merits anymore. Amar le, idbe rabbanam. What do you mean? They have the rabbis. Again, this theme of the rabbis being so important. Well, Amar le amachad. Look, they're one nation, Haman says. Meaning, you could say, this can mean different things, but you could say either they also are sleeping from the mitzvot, or it means they're responsible for everyone. Kol Yisrael Revim said, we're all responsible for other people. If they're doing well, but the people aren't, well, that's the rabbi's fault. So that's what he says, right? They're amachad. Yeshno amachad. Shema Tomar. Now here, instead of Achashverosh saying, well, this, that, comes Haman, he says, listen, you might say this, I got an answer. You might say this, I got an answer. Shema Tomar, if you wipe them all out, we're going to have a big empty space in the land. Well, they're scattered everywhere. It won't really make any bit of a difference. Shema Tomar, Itana Aminai. What do you mean? We benefit from them, right? They're wealthy people. They give to the economy. Well, Miforad, they're like, instead of Miforad is being split, it's like a pirda, mule. Ki pirda zo she'eno sepirot, right? They're like a mule that doesn't have any children. They might be wealthy, but they're not really giving anything to our economy. Okay, they're keeping it all within themselves. Maybe they're, like the classic anti-Semitism is, right? They're keeping it all for themselves. They're taking our money from us. Maybe you'd say, okay, some people explain this. I'll explain it this way because otherwise it sounds very much like the earlier one. But maybe we can put them all into one place. This is the ghetto argument. Let's collect them and put them all in one place and then leave them on their own. Talmud Lamar, they're spread all around. There's no way to make a ghetto out of all of them. How are their laws different? They don't eat our food. They don't marry our women. And we don't marry our, right? They don't, or lo nasbe minan means they don't take their daughters to give to us to marry, and they don't marry our daughters. That's lo minas be'lan. They don't do the king's rules. They don't work. They're always saying Shabbat Hayom, Pesach Hayom, Shai Pai, Shabbat Hayom, Pai, Pesach Hayom. They're always saying, oh, it's a holiday, it's a holiday, it's a holiday. They never even work. It's not worth it. Why? It's not worth your while because they're embarrassing you when they eat and drink. How's this? This is what we call yayin nesef. Once a Gentile touches your wine, you're not allowed to drink it because maybe he offered it up to his idols. So therefore, what do they do? Here he says, he twists it to say, a bug gets into their food, they spill it out. But I'm sorry, they throw out the bug and the bee and they drink the wine. But yet, if the king touches their cup, they spill it out, right? They spill it on the ground, they won't drink it. Last rasha for today. We're going to get all this money, all these, right? This money. God who created the world knew he was going to ask for money. Therefore, God said, we're going to start collecting shkalim in the month of Adar. Right? We learned this already in shkalim. On the 1st of Adar, they would already start collecting the shkalim, and they would start at telling people about the forbidden kilayim. I'm not going to get into that, but the point is, God said, start collecting money on the 1st of Adar, so that the zchut of the mitzvah of that will help you to go against Haman, who wants to destroy you and wants to take all this money from you. And with that, we'll finish our drasha for today and lots more tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed. Have a Shabbat Shalom or Shavua Tov to all of you.